Looking at editorials and question bank for 17th November. The first editorial in the Hindu newspaper is against the odds. So this is regarding the examinations which were conducted in Kashmir presently. The class 10th examination showed 95% plus attendance. Also class 12th attendance was quite high. So this shows that despite all odds, students came forward and attempted the examination. The syllabus had also been curtailed, keeping into consideration that students could not attend schools because of the protests which had erupted in Kashmir post the July 8 killing of Hizbul Mujahideen leader Burhan Wani. So protests had been continuing, stone pelting continued unabated. Also the police used pellet guns which are supposed to be non-lethal but had resulted in injuries to many students and youths in Kashmir. Eye injuries were very prominent. So all this was seen. Even the government then had taken initiative to stop the usage of pellet guns too. So these were what was going on in Jammu and Kashmir. Also another significant part of this protest was the burning of school buildings. So school buildings were put on fire by miscreants. This was the worst part because it resulted in a threat being generated and students fearing attending schools. So this is how the protest was planned to continue. But despite all odds, now we see that students are coming forward, and this is the future of the Jammu and Kashmir youth, that they are attending schools and completing their education process to make a good life for themselves. So this has to be encouraged. Also, it talks of the defense minister talking of after the demonetization drive, the protests in Jammu and Kashmir have become very low now. So he says this was how the funding was given. So this may be true, but what the editorial also asks for is this government showing concern for the atrocities which the Jammu and Kashmir people face, for concern for the economic well-being and their lives. So that is also demanded, so that even here the healing process can take place and Jammu and Kashmir is brought back to normal. Then the next news editorial is a challenge and an opportunity. So this is regarding the China-Pakistan economic corridor. You should know this has been planned 1.5 years back, and now the first phase, as it says, of this program, the trade route, has been put into effect. So first shipment is now moving from Gwadar port further into Europe also. So this is regarding the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CEPC) project, which is also part of OBOR, One Belt One Road initiative, which we have discussed in news yesterday. So this is a link from land to sea route, means new Silk Road initiative and new Maritime Silk Route, both which are the two constituents of OBOR, One Belt One Road of China. This is the link between them. So this is a CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, joining Kashgar in China to Gwadar, a port here which has been built by China in Pakistan. So presently the news is that the first trade route has been established and transit has taken place from Kashgar to Gwadar and further into the Gulf and in Africa also. So this is the news. So this China-Pakistan Economic Corridor project has been protested against by India as well. The reason being that it passes through this Gilgit-Baltistan region, which is the part of POK. So it is passing through a disputed land. How can China establish a project here? So this has been put forth before the UN as well by India. And India refuses to be part of OBOR of China because it says it is a strategic threat to itself too. But all other countries like Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, in the neighborhood of Bangladesh, in the neighborhood of India, have become part of OBOR. So this is again, we have to awaken to this initiative too. Plus, of course, we consider Gwadar, where China has its presence, as a threat. It can be later established as a naval base too. Presently, it may be for economic purpose. And this CPEC is also protested against it in Pakistan as well. Though it is going to result into much more benefits to Pakistan, but even critics are there in Pakistan as well as in China. So critics in Pakistan say that what China is trying to do is dominate Pakistan. So it is establishing a rail route. This is a transport route. So road rail routes will be developed. Energy projects would be developed along the route. So it would result in huge economic development of Pakistan as well. But then this is what East India Company also did. For trade purposes, it laid down railway lines. So this is new East India Company which China is becoming in Pakistan. So this is what critics in Pakistan say. But it will also establish transport infrastructure, roads and rail routes, but also both conventional and non-conventional energy projects are also planned along this route. So coal-based, gas-based, as well as solar power plants are proposed and will be established here. So that would have a combined energy capacity of around 10,000 megawatts. So that will be the capacity, and it would result in even job generation, employment generation. 7 lakh jobs are expected to be established in Pakistan by 2030. So of course it would be economically beneficial for Pakistan, but then strategically how much it is giving away to China is what critics say in Pakistan. Plus there are critics, as I said, also in China, because the transit route, the trade route which is proposed, this passes through regions which are regions of unrest. So this FATA, NWFP, Northwest Frontier Province, this is federally administered tribal area, Balochistan, these are regions where terrorists are present and the terrorist activities continue. These are also places where Afghan terrorists take refuge. So Taliban, IS all have presence here. This was the original proposed trade route, you can see. Then later it was changed and this is the trade route now. China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, as it is said. So this is the criticism in China, that this is high risk investment. Rather, if trade route is established beyond to Africa and along the Gulf, if the maritime trade route is used through Southeast Asia, it would be much more beneficial and very low risk investment. So this has been questioned. So Pakistan political instability is a problem, as well as Chinese economic slowdown is also reflected on this project. So this project in its first year has already been delayed. So even World Bank has said that delay in this project would affect Pakistan's economic development as well. So these are the points. India's stand, it opposes ABOR. Again, Pakistan, Russia coming together. Yesterday also in news we discussed Pakistan, China, Russia will have a trilateral meet on Afghanistan, in which India, Iran, though named as stakeholders, are not included. So this closeness which we see with Russia also, so this is also a problem, a threat strategically for India. So how should India respond to it has to be decided now. But in one way, this project is beneficial for India, because if CPEC is established and has to be successful, means trade should flourish here, then India-Pakistan relations should remain strong, because if Pakistan engages in war with India, then it cannot have peace here and these regions will again not develop the way expected. So then it puts in high incentive for Pakistan to maintain good relations with India, not indulge in terrorist activities and wars along the fronts, LOC and international border. So this is a benefit also. Next, we look at the question bank. The two questions which we have picked up for today, one is based on the Domestic Violence Act article which was there. The lead article today is again on demonetization, and there is no new fresh point which comes up. So there is no need to discuss that article. Then the Domestic Violence Act, the question framed is, discuss the major provisions of the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005. Can domestic violence be treated as gender neutral? What is the stand of the judiciary in this matter? So recently the Supreme Court has given its judgment on a case in Domestic Violence Act wherein it is asking for a modification to a particular clause in this act. So this Domestic Violence Act of 2005 was enacted to provide protection to women against domestic violence. So the perpetrator of domestic violence is expected to be a man. So a man in a relation with a woman, it may be a marriage or even a live-in similar to a marriage which has been incorporated. So if the man indulges in violence, physical, emotional, sexual, on a woman, then these provisions under this act can be evoked against him. But then a man and even his relatives, close relatives who are involved, can also be named. So there are women, mother-in-laws also named, sister-in-laws, they are also named under this. But presently in a provision, in a judgment which the Supreme Court has given on a particular case, it has said that only women can also be perpetrators of domestic violence under this act. So making it gender neutral means that it's not only against men, but this Domestic Violence Act can be evoked even against women. So this has been questioned, that can it be gender neutral, and what is the stand of the judiciary on this matter. So looking at the major provisions too, you can see here. So complainants of course can only be women, but then whom are you complaining against? Those people can be adult male. As per the section 2Q in the act, it says it can be filed against adult males or their relatives who could be women, but it cannot be filed solely against the relatives of the husband. So this is the present provision under section 2Q of Domestic Violence Act. But now what is the Supreme Court's provisions we'll see. Also, as the first part of the question is important provisions of the act, so they have been put forth here because such questions are also asked by UPSC. So this section 2F, as you see, defines domestic relationship. As I said, it's not just about marriage but living together in a shared household. Then it talks about what is a shared household too. Then it defines what constitutes domestic violence too: physical as well as sexual abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, economic abuse, all part of domestic violence. Then section 11 talks of government giving publicity to this law, creating awareness about this law as such. Then section 17 provides for right to reside in a shared household. So a woman cannot be in a marriage, cannot be moved out of the household. She has a right to that household which is shared post marriage. Then section 18 calls for a magistrate to issue protection orders which prohibits a respondent from committing domestic violence and other acts. So such domestic violence against domestic violence orders can also be issued by a magistrate. So these are the major provisions. You can go through them. Next, what we look at is the recent Supreme Court judgment. So the recent judgment has been on deleting the word adult male in section 2Q of the act that we saw right now. So it can be against only women also. So the judgment says that violence is gender neutral. It is also clear that physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse and economic abuse can all be by women against another woman. So this is the Supreme Court's judgment presently. So it says the word adult and the word male should be deleted from section 2Q. It also says that it need not be an adult who commits domestic violence. It can be by a 16-17-year-old person too. So this is the judgment of the Supreme Court presently. But then the article questions it and says that domestic violence cannot be gender neutral because this is the case even under another provision which is in 1983 it was enacted, section 498A of Indian Penal Code. Even under this was the first time that domestic violence against a married woman was considered as a criminal offense. So this also talks of domestic violence being indulged in by husband or husband's relatives. So that is the same stand which was taken under this act also of 2005. It says this part was section 2Q was heavily debated also while passing this act, and it was enacted finally in favor of keeping it as adult male and relatives. So this now been rejected by the Supreme Court is going against what has been established. Even worldwide there are viewpoints, as eventually it says too that even in 2015 report UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, she pointed out that shift in domestic violence laws from gender specificity to gender neutrality is regressive. So the whole article is based on the point that is principle of equality which Supreme Court upholds is not substantive equality. But it means that women and men are not equals. Substantive equality is relative equality. Absolute equality cannot be brought in. Relative equality means until and unless the disadvantages which women face are addressed, the stigma, prejudice, humiliation and violence which they face are eliminated, the social and institutional structures are transformed in such a way that equality is ensured, political participation is facilitated, social inclusion takes place, only then can you talk of equality between men and women. So until then, talking of absolute equality and treating them as equals is not called for. So this is the point on which the argument is based, that Domestic Violence Act itself is for protection of women. So how can that be gender neutral? So this is a viewpoint here, but you can write an answer completely on the opposite viewpoint too, that it has to be gender neutral. So we do see that perpetrators of domestic violence can also be the females in the family, the mother-in-laws, the sister-in-laws. So these people also become upholders of patriarchy. So patriarchy is male domination. So male domination is made to become prevalent even by women. So then why not act against such women also? So that depends on how good your justification is. Your answer can be absolutely gaining points irrespective of the stand you take if you give right justifications. Then coming to the next question. The question is, the voices against globalization are now being raised in the developed world as well. What are the consequences of these on Asia? How can India and China move ahead to assert their dominance? So globalization as a concept we are seeing is taking a beating. People are talking of protectionism, not just in India but even in European Western countries, Europe and USA. So we saw Brexit as an example where people wanted protectionism and out of the EU. Then there was also the present election of US President Donald Trump, in which the agenda which he put forth was bringing in protectionism against visas being provided to people from developing world, including India. So all these protectionist policies which are being perpetrated in Western world right now is what India and other developing countries were calling for, protectionism against the developed world, when globalization was propagated by all Western powers and the banks, World Bank and IMF. So they wanted terms of trade to take into consideration their status as an economy, the conditionalities which were imposed on funds which were provided to open up trade, open up the economy, the intellectual property rights issues which resulted in even in essential drugs for life-threatening diseases becoming very costly. So all these points have been raised by developing countries, but they were unheard, and now the developed countries themselves are seeing protests by their people against globalization. So where does the Asia stand in this whole scenario? It says that now is the time for Asian dominance. China has become an economic superpower now, and India, though it is undergoing a slowdown, and India is also developing at a very fast pace. So both together can bring in an era of Asian dominance now. So that is the point highlighted. So the economists who proposed globalization, like David Ricardo, who talked of comparative advantage of countries. So country where it is having advantage should produce only those commodities, remaining can be dependent on external trade. And Adam Smith, who talked of competition for creating wealth. So it was for laissez-faire, the minimum interference by the government and market should determine the prices. So all this is now taken a back seat because we see globalization being protested against throughout. So here is the idea of Asian dominance too. It says China is a superpower in manufacturing sector and India is a superpower in services sector. So goods and services both can be provided by China and India together, and they can dominate global economy. So that is an argument put forth for which the two countries have to come together. Even it says that India should become a part of OBOR also, One Belt One Road initiative, and help in developing a low carbon digital sharing economy. So this is what we should emphasize on. A new knowledge based order including new pharmaceuticals, crop varieties can be established by India. So India has a huge biodiversity as well as a huge biotechnology industry too prospering. So why not take us forward through the services sector only? So that is one point put forth. There are also issues like South China Sea dispute which is there. So it says talking for mutual respect. You respect their territory, adjoining regions, and China respects our region, that is Indian Ocean dominance for India, and South China Sea having independence in its policies in those regions for China. So this is how it puts forth the idea that the two nations can bring in Asian dominance, and it says that trade will surpass security. So military aspects which are highlighted will take a back step if trade is prospering. So trade will ensure peace as well, as we always know. So these are the points put forth here. So that is it for today. You can download the PDF from the website. The link is provided in the description. One single PDF containing news, editorial and question bank for every day is uploaded on the website. So we'll provide a compilation too at the end of the month. Thank you so much.